A quiet evening interrupted. Terence sat on his usual park bench, a familiar spot in a small corner of Savannah, Georgia. The golden hues of the setting sun stretched over the park, casting long shadows across joggers, families, and groups of friends. For Terence, this park was a haven, a place where he could sit, sip his water, and let the rhythm of the world pass him by. Life had thrown him curveballs, but here he found moments of solace. At first glance, Terence seemed like an ordinary middle-aged man. He was in his early 40s, his broad frame wrapped in a loose hoodie and worn jeans. A soft smile often played on his lips, but behind those eyes lay stories he rarely shared. Terence had lived a life full of peaks and valleys, victories and losses. He had once been a regional Brazilian jiu-jitsu champion, known for his skill, precision, and discipline. But life hadn't been kind in recent years. After losing his wife in a tragic car accident, Terence sought comfort in food, gradually leaving his lean, athletic build behind. Still, beneath the layers, the fighter remained. Each morning before the city woke, Terence rolled out a mat in his garage, practicing moves that were second nature to him. Shadowboxing under dim lights and drilling grappling techniques against a heavy bag, he kept his mind and body sharp. No one in the park knew this side of him. To them, he was just another face in the crowd. That evening, as Terence watched the world go by, his peace was interrupted by a group of young men near the basketball court. Their laughter cut through the gentle hum of the park, but it wasn't the joyful kind. It was sharp, mocking, laughter that sought out a target. "Yo, big man," one of them called out, loud enough to draw attention. Terence glanced over, his calm demeanor unwavering. The group's leader, a wiry teen with a shaved head and a cocky smirk, pointed at Terence with exaggerated gestures. "What's up with heavyweight over there? Missed leg day, huh?" The boy's voice carried, drawing chuckles from his friends. Terence sighed internally, recognizing the type. He had encountered bullies like them countless times growing up. A pack mentality emboldened by numbers. He considered ignoring them, letting their words fall into the void of his indifference. But as the laughter grew louder, a shift in the air told him that letting this slide wouldn't be enough. The leader approached, his swagger exaggerated as he gestured to his friends. "Yo, you deaf, man. I said, what's up? You got a problem?" Terence remained seated, his calm gaze meeting the boys. "I don't have a problem," he said evenly, "just enjoying the evening." The group erupted in more laughter, feeding off their leader's energy. "Enjoying the evening? Bro, you look like you've been enjoying a few too many evenings. You gotta hit the gym, man." Terence's heart remained steady. He had learned long ago that words were just words. But when one of the boys, a wiry teenager with a backwards baseball cap, stepped forward and shoved him lightly on the shoulder, the situation changed. "You're in our park, old man," the boy sneered. "Maybe you should keep moving before we make you." The shove wasn't forceful, but it was enough to reignite instincts Terence had buried. His body tensed as the group surrounded him. He glanced at the spilled water bottle on the ground, its contents glistening under the fading sunlight. Terence stood slowly, his full height overshadowing the group. For a moment, there was hesitation in their eyes, but their leader quickly masked it with bravado. "What, you gonna do something about it?" he taunted. "Simon, big guy, show us what you've got." Terence's voice was calm, but it carried a quiet authority. "Walk away. This is your chance to stop." The leader laughed nervously, gesturing to his crew. "You hear that? He thinks he's gonna scare us. Man, you're just a washed-up dude, whoa." The boy didn't finish his sentence. One of his friends lunged toward Terence, reaching for his arm. It was a clumsy, uncoordinated move, the kind of attack that screamed inexperience. Terence sidestepped with practiced ease, grabbing the boy's wrist and twisting it just enough to send him sprawling to the ground. The laughter stopped. The group stared at their friend groaning on the pavement, stunned by how quickly the tables had turned. "Whoa," one of them exclaimed, stepping back. "What just happened?" Terrence's voice was calm but firm. "I warned you. This isn't what you want." But instead of backing down, the remaining boys rushed at him, emboldened by adrenaline and a misguided sense of pride. Terrence's body moved on instinct, years of training guiding his actions. The first boy came at him swinging wildly. Terrence ducked, stepping to the side and using the boy's momentum to send him stumbling forward. Another grabbed for his hoodie, but Terrence spun, locking the boy's arm and bringing him to his knees. By now, the leader's bravado had cracked. He stood frozen, watching as Terrence dismantled his crew with precision and control. One of the boys picked up a jagged stick, charging at Terrence with desperation. Terrence disarmed him in a single fluid motion, the stick clattering to the ground. The leader raised his hands, backing away. Okay, man. We're done. You made your point." Terrence stepped closer, his towering frame casting a shadow over the young man. "You think strength is about picking on someone who won't fight back," he said, his voice steady. "Strength is knowing when to walk away. Maybe it's time you learn the difference." The leader swallowed hard, nodding. Yeah, okay, we're done." The group scrambled to gather themselves, mumbling apologies as they retreated. Terrence watched them go, his heart heavy. He hadn't wanted this confrontation, but sometimes standing your ground was the only way to teach a lesson. As the park slowly returned to normal, a few onlookers approached Terrence, their expressions a mix of admiration and curiosity. A young boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing at Terrence. "Mom, is he a superhero?" Terrence smiled softly, shaking his head. "No, kid. Just someone who doesn't like bullies." But as the evening wore on, Terrence couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. What happened next would shape more than just the young men he had encountered. It would spark a ripple effect that would touch the entire community. Reflections and ripples. The next morning, sunlight streamed through Terrence's kitchen window, painting warm patches on the worn tiles. He stood by the counter, sipping a steaming cup of coffee, replaying the events of the previous evening in his mind. The fight in the park wasn't something he had wanted, but it had felt inevitable. The mocking, the shoving. He'd seen it escalate before in others' lives, often to dangerous ends. The scene felt like an echo of his past. As a kid growing up in a tough neighborhood, Terrence had faced his fair share of bullies. Back then, he'd lacked the tools to stand up for himself until his Uncle Ray, a former Golden Gloves boxer, introduced him to martial arts. It had been a revelation, an outlet for his anger, a discipline that gave him control over his emotions, and a means to protect himself when the world turned hostile. But yesterday wasn't about reliving those old battles. It wasn't about proving strength or dominance. It was about sending a message to a group of misguided boys who thought power came from gaining up on the vulnerable. The question that lingered now was, had they understood it? Terrence sighed and put his coffee cup down. He walked to his garage, pushing open the creaky door to reveal a modest training space. The mats were scuffed, and the heavy bag hung from the ceiling like a silent sentinel. This was his sanctuary, a place where he could work through his thoughts as much as his moves. He wrapped his hands methodically, the ritual grounding him. Each movement, each wrap around his knuckles, reminded him of the discipline he had honed over decades. Dropping into a defensive stance, Terrence began throwing slow, deliberate punches at the bag. The rhythm of his movements steadied his mind. Jab, cross, hook. Jab, cross, hook. With each strike, his thoughts wandered to the young men at the park. What had driven them to become bullies? Was it boredom? Anger? A lack of guidance? Terrence didn't know, but he understood one thing. They weren't beyond redemption. He had seen kids like them turn their lives around. But for that to happen, someone had to reach them before it was too late. Later that day, Terrence returned to the park. The sun was high, casting sharp shadows under the oaks. The park was busier than usual. Kids ran across the playground. Joggers pounded the paths, and parents gathered around benches in clusters. Terrence's eyes scanned the basketball court, half expecting to see the gang from the night before. But the court was empty, the echoes of bouncing basketballs replaced by birdsong. As he walked, people nodded at him, some offering small smiles or a quiet thank you. The confrontation hadn't gone unnoticed. An older woman, her white hair tied back in a bun, approached him. "You're Terrence, right?" she asked, her voice warm but firm. He nodded. "Yes, Mom. Can I help you?" She extended her hand. "I'm Miss Evelyn. I've been bringing my grandkids to this park for years. Yesterday, well, let's just say you made quite an impression." Terrence shook her hand, unsure of how to respond. Miss Evelyn didn't wait for an answer. "Those boys have been causing trouble for weeks, harassing kids, intimidating parents. Nobody knew what to do. Then you stepped in." Her eyes softened. "I just wanted to say thank you." Terrence shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't used to praise, especially for something he felt was just common decency. "I just did what I had to," he said. "Didn't want anyone getting hurt." Miss Evelyn studied him for a moment. "Have you thought about doing more than that?" "More?" Terrence asked, puzzled. She nodded. "Those boys need guidance, someone to show them there's another way to be strong. Maybe you could be that person." Terrence hesitated. The idea of stepping into a mentorship role felt daunting. "I'm not sure I'm the right guy for that," he admitted. "I've got my own struggles." Miss Evelyn smiled knowingly. "Sometimes it's the ones who've been through the fire that can guide others out of it. Just think about it, okay?" Terrence did think about it. Long after Miss Evelyn left, the idea lingered as he sat on his usual bench, watching the park come alive with activity. He noticed the small things, the way kids helped each other climb the jungle gym, the shared laughter of friends on the swings, the quiet nods exchanged between parents. The park was more than a patch of grass and trees. It was a community. And communities only thrived when people stepped up to protect and nurture them. As he mulled over Miss Evelyn's words, a familiar figure appeared on the path. Angela, the school teacher who had spoken to him the night before. She carried a tote bag filled with papers and books, her pace brisk but unhurried. "Terrence," she greeted with a smile. "Good to see you again." "Angela," he replied, standing to meet her. "What brings you back?" She gestured toward the playground. "I come here to grade papers sometimes. The fresh air helps me focus. Plus, it's nice to see the kids playing. Reminds me why I do what I do." Terrence nodded, understanding the sentiment. Angela tilted her head, studying him. "You've been on my mind," she said. "After what happened yesterday, I couldn't help but think, you've got something those boys need." Miss Evelyn said the same thing, Terrence admitted, "but I'm not sure I'm cut out for it." Angela raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" He shrugged, struggling to put his thoughts into words. "I'm just trying to keep myself together most days. What do I have to offer them?" Angela smiled gently. "Discipline, strength, perspective. You've been through things they can't even imagine, but you've come out the other side. That's something worth sharing." Terrence didn't respond immediately, but Angela could see the gears turning in his mind. She decided to press on. "The community center has been looking for someone to start a self-defense program," she said. "I could put in a word for you." Terrence looked at her, surprised. "You think they'd want me?" "I think they'd be lucky to have you," Angela replied. "And who knows, it might be exactly what you need too." That evening, Terrence sat in his living room, the television flickering softly in the background. He barely noticed the program as he stared at the phone in his hand, Angela's offer replaying in his mind. A self-defense program. It sounded intimidating, but it also felt right. Terrence thought about the boys from the park. He imagined what could happen if no one stepped in to guide them. Jail. A hospital. Worse, the thought made his chest tighten. He had the tools to help them, to offer them the same lifeline Uncle Ray had given him all those years ago. Finally, he dialed the number Angela had given him. When the line connected, He took a deep breath. "Hi, this is Terrence Daniels," he said. "I'm calling about the self-defense program. I'd like to help." On the other end, the voice of the community center director was warm and enthusiastic. "Terrence, we've been waiting for someone like you. Let's set up a meeting." As Terrence hung up, a sense of purpose settled over him. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to walk it. The first steps. The community center was a modest building nestled between a library and a row of local shops. Its brick facade had seen better days, but the cheerful voices of children spilling out of its doors brought the place to life. Terrence parked his car in the lot and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. He wasn't nervous, exactly, but the idea of stepping into something new after so many years of solitude gave him pause. He took a deep breath, gathered his thoughts, and walked inside. The lobby smelled faintly of floor wax and popcorn, the kind of scent that evoked memories of school gymnasiums and movie nights. A receptionist at the front desk greeted him with a warm smile. "You must be Mr. Daniels," she said. "Mr. Carter is waiting for you in the conference room." Terrence nodded, offering a polite smile in return. "Thank you." She pointed him down a hallway, where the hum of conversation grew louder. When he reached the room, he found a man in his late 50s standing near a whiteboard. He was tall and lean, with salt and pepper hair, and the kind of easy confidence that came from years of community work. The man looked up, his face breaking into a wide grin. "Terrence, I'm Greg Carter, the director here. It's great to finally meet you." They shook hands firmly. Terrence liked Greg immediately. He had an approachable demeanor that put people at ease. "I've heard a lot about you," Greg said, motioning for Terrence to sit. "Angela and Miss Evelyn both sang your praises." Terrence chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I'm not sure I deserve all that. I just did what anyone else would have done." Greg leaned back in his chair, studying him. "I think you're underestimating yourself. Standing up for others takes courage, especially in a situation like that. And now you're here, ready to turn that courage into something bigger." Terrence nodded slowly. I don't want those kids to end up in a bad place. If I can do something to steer them in a better direction, I'll try." "That's all we can ask for," Greg said. "Let me show you what we've got so far." He walked Terrence through the plans for the self-defense program. The idea was simple. Teach basic skills to build confidence, discipline, and resilience. But Greg made it clear that the program wasn't just about physical training. "We want these kids to understand the power of control," he explained. "It's not about fighting. It's about knowing when not to fight, teaching them discipline and respect for themselves and others." Terrence felt a flicker of something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Purpose. "I can do that," he said, his voice steady. "When do we start?" The following week, Terrence returned to the center to prepare for his first class. The gym was a large open space with worn mats covering the floor and basketball hoops lining the walls. Greg had given him free rein to set up the program how he saw fit. Terrence brought in some basic equipment, focus mitts, resistance bands, and a few extra mats he had at home. As he arranged the space, a group of kids began filtering in. Some were young, no older than 8 or 9, while others were teenagers, their postures a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Among them, Terrence recognized one familiar face, the wiry teenager from the park, the one who had shoved him. The boy avoided Terrence's gaze, shuffling to the back of the group. Terrence pretended not to notice, instead focusing on introducing himself to the class. He stood tall but approachable, his voice calm yet commanding. "Welcome, everyone," he began. "My name's Terrence, but you can call me Coach T. This program is about more than learning to defend yourself. It's about building confidence, discipline, and respect. You'll learn how to handle yourself in tough situations, but more importantly, you'll learn how to avoid them." The kids murmured among themselves, their expressions ranging from eager to doubtful. Terrence wasn't fazed. He'd seen that look before, on his own face, decades ago, when Uncle Ray had dragged him to his first boxing gym. "Let's start with the basics," Terrence said, clapping his hands. "Line up on the mats. We're going to learn how to fall safely." The kids exchanged confused glances. One of the older boys, a lanky teen with a mop of curly hair, raised his hand. "Coach T, I thought we were here to fight, not fall." Terrence smiled. "If you can't fall without hurting yourself, you're not ready to fight. Trust me, you'll thank me later." He demonstrated a simple backward breakfall, showing them how to tuck their chin and slap the mat to absorb impact. Then, one by one, he guided them through the motion. Some caught on quickly, while others struggled, flailing their arms or landing awkwardly. Terrence moved among them, offering encouragement and gentle corrections. By the end of the first hour, the mood in the room had shifted. The initial skepticism had softened into curiosity, and even the wiry teen from the park seemed to be paying attention. As the kids packed up to leave, Terrence called out, "Good work today. Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about showing up and giving it your best. I'll see you all next week." The wiry teen hesitated at the door, glancing back at Terrence. Their eyes met briefly before the boy turned and hurried out. That evening, Terrence sat on his porch, the cool breeze carrying the scent of freshly cut grass. He thought about the class, the kids, and the boy from the park. It wasn't lost on him that the same hands that had shoved him were now trying to learn from him. It was a strange twist, but one that gave him hope. Terrence knew it wouldn't be an easy road. Some kids would quit, others might resist the lessons, and progress would come in small, often imperceptible steps. But he also knew that change was possible, one choice at a time. As the stars blinked into the night sky, Terrence allowed himself a rare moment of pride. For the first time in years, he felt like he was doing something that mattered, not just for himself, but for the community, and that, he realized, was worth every struggle along the way. The first step had been taken. Now it was time to see where the path would lead. A test of patience. The gym at the community center hummed with activity as Terrence prepared for his second class. It had been a week since the first session, and he'd spent the time reviewing his approach, thinking about what worked and what didn't. The kids had been a mixed bag, some eager, some hesitant, and a few clearly resistant. Among them, the wiry teen from the park had stood out. Terrence didn't know his name yet, but he recognized the boy's guarded eyes and defensive posture all too well. They were the marks of someone used to being underestimated. As the kids filed in, Terrence greeted them with his usual calm demeanor. He'd learned that consistency mattered. If they knew what to expect from him, they'd feel safer stepping out of their comfort zones. The wiry teen entered last, slinking into the back row as though trying to go unnoticed. Terrence let it slide. For now. "All right, everyone," Terrence said, clapping his hands to gather their attention. "Last week, we worked on falling safely. Today, we're going to build on that with basic escapes. These are techniques you can use if someone grabs you. They're simple, but they work." He demonstrated a wrist escape first, showing how to use leverage rather than strength to break free. Then he moved on to a shoulder grab escape, explaining the importance of maintaining balance and staying calm. "Remembered," he said, addressing the group, "this isn't about overpowering anyone. It's about using their force against them. Size doesn't matter if you know how to move." The kids paired up to practice. Terrence walked among them, offering pointers and gentle corrections. Most of the kids were trying, their movements awkward but improving. The wiry teen, however, stood to the side, arms crossed. "Not feeling it today?" Terrence asked, keeping his tone light. The boy shrugged. "Don't need this. Nobody's grabbing me." Terrence nodded, pretending to consider the boy's words. "Fair enough. But let me ask you something. What would you do if someone did?" The boy's jaw tightened. "I hit him. Hard." Terrence smiled faintly. "Hitting works, sometimes, but it also escalates things. What if they're bigger than you? Or there's more than one of them?" The boy didn't answer, but the tension in his shoulders suggested he was listening. "Tell you what," Terrence said. "Partner up with me for a minute. Let me show you something." Reluctantly, the boy stepped forward. Terrence extended his hand, grasping the boy's wrist lightly. "Okay, now try to pull your arm away." The boy yanked, his movements wild and uncoordinated. Terrence held firm, his grip barely shifting. "Now," Terrence said, releasing the wrist. "Instead of pulling, step toward me. Turn your wrist like this." He demonstrated, twisting his wrist slightly to break the hold. "And push against my thumb." "Go ahead. Try it." The boy hesitated, then followed Terrence's instructions. This time, his wrist slipped free with ease. His eyes widened, surprise replacing skepticism. "See," Terrence said. "It's not about being stronger. It's about being smarter." The boy didn't say anything, but he nodded slightly before returning to the group. Terrence didn't press him further. Sometimes, planting a seed was enough. Over the next few weeks, the class grew. Word had spread about the program, and more kids began showing up, eager to learn. Terrence adapted quickly, splitting the group into smaller clusters so he could give each student more attention. The wiry teen, who Terrence now knew as Malik, continued to attend, though his participation remained sporadic. Some days, he practiced diligently. Other days, he hung back, his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. It wasn't just Malik who tested Terrence's patience. A few of the older kids, emboldened by their size and attitude, started showing off during drills. They'd turn simple techniques into exaggerated performances, laughing as they pretended to dominate their partners. Terrence addressed it firmly but calmly. "Cut the theatrics," he said one evening, his voice steady but sharp enough to command attention. "This isn't a place for showing off. If you're not here to learn, you're wasting everyone's time, including your own." The kids grumbled but fell back in line. Terrence had learned long ago that authority didn't have to be loud to be effective. Consistency, fairness, and respect did more to earn trust than yelling ever could. One evening, after class had ended, Terrence noticed Malik lingering near the door. Most of the kids had already left, their laughter echoing down the hallway, but Malik seemed hesitant to follow. Terrence decided to wait him out, continuing to tidy up the mats until the boy finally approached. "Coach T." Malik's voice was quieter than usual, almost unsure. Terrence looked up, his expression neutral. "What's up, Malik?" The boy shifted uncomfortably. "That stuff you said about being smarter, not stronger, does it really work? Like in real life?" Terrence set down the mat he was folding and walked over, his tone gentle but serious. "Yeah, it works. I've used it more times than I can count." Malik hesitated, then blurted, What if someone's always messing with you? Like every day?" Terrence's heart sank. He had suspected Malik's attitude came from a place of pain, but hearing it confirmed was another matter entirely. He crouched slightly to meet the boy's gaze. "If someone's messing with you, the first thing you do is tell someone you trust," Terrence said. "You don't have to handle it alone. But if it comes to standing up for yourself, yeah, what I'm teaching you works. It's not just about moves, Malik. It's about believing you're worth defending." Malik's eyes flickered with something Terrence couldn't quite place. Relief? Hope? The boy nodded once before mumbling, "Thanks," and hurrying out the door. That night, as Terrence sat in his garage, the weight of Malik's words stayed with him. He thought about his own struggles as a kid, the loneliness of facing bullies without knowing how to fight back. He thought about Uncle Ray, who had stepped in when no one else had. And he thought about the ripple effects of his actions, how one small moment of guidance could change the trajectory of someone's life. Terrence threw a few slow punches at the heavy bag, his mind racing. He knew he couldn't save every kid who walked through those gym doors. But if he could reach just one, if he could help someone like Malik see their own worth, then it would all be worth it. The class wasn't just about teaching self-defense anymore. It was about something bigger, showing these kids that strength came in many forms, and that even in the face of adversity, they could rise. The turning point. The weeks stretched into months, and Terrence's self-defense program became a cornerstone of the community center. Kids of all ages and backgrounds filled the gym each evening, their laughter and shouts echoing off the walls as they practiced drills, learned techniques, and grew in confidence. For Terrence, the program had become more than just a class. It was a mission. Among the regular attendees, Malik remained an enigma. The wiry teen was no longer hesitant to participate, but he carried a guarded energy that made him difficult to read. Terrence noticed Malik worked harder than most, his focus sharp, as if he was channeling something deeper with every movement. But outside of class, Malik kept to himself, slipping out of the gym as soon as practice ended. One evening, after the session had wrapped up and the kids were filtering out, Terrence saw Malik sitting alone on the bleachers. The boy stared at the floor, his shoulders hunched and his hands clenched into fists. Terrence paused, debating whether to approach. Malik had a way of putting up walls, but something about his posture told Terrence this was one of those moments where reaching out mattered. He walked over, his footsteps light but deliberate. "Malik," he said softly, "you good?" The boy flinched slightly but didn't look up. "I'm fine," he muttered, though the tightness in his voice betrayed him. Terrence sat down a few feet away, giving Malik space but making it clear he wasn't going anywhere. "You don't seem fine," he said gently. "Wanna talk about it?" Malik hesitated for what felt like an eternity before finally speaking. "There's this guy," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "At school. He's older, bigger, keeps messing with me, shoving me into lockers, taking my stuff. I told a teacher, but it just made things worse. Now he's got his friends doing it too." Terrence's chest tightened. He had suspected Malik was dealing with something serious, but hearing it spelled out made his heart ache. "I'm sorry you're going through that," he said. "Nobody deserves to be treated like that." Malik's head snapped up, his eyes blazing with frustration. "What am I supposed to do, huh? Fight them? There's too many. And if I do, I'll just get in trouble. So what's the point?" Terrence met the boy's gaze, his expression steady. "The point is that you don't let them take your power. Fighting isn't always the answer, but neither is giving up. You've got options." "Like what?" Malik shot back. "Talking to them. They don't listen." Terrence leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "You're right. They probably won't listen. But you can still stand your ground. It's not about winning a fight. It's about showing them you're not an easy target. Bullies thrive on fear. Take that away, and they lose their grip." Malik frowned, his frustration giving way to a flicker of curiosity. "How?" Terrence thought for a moment. "By being prepared. By knowing you've got the tools to protect yourself if it comes to that. And by showing them you're not afraid to use them." The next few sessions, Terrence tailored parts of the class to situations like Malik's. He introduced techniques for dealing with multiple attackers, focusing on staying calm and finding opportunities to disengage safely. He emphasized awareness, how to read a situation, identify threats, and avoid escalation. Malik soaked it up like a sponge. His movements became sharper, his confidence more visible with each passing day. Terrence noticed a change in the boy's demeanor. He held himself taller, his eyes no longer darting nervously around the room. Still, Terrence knew that Malik's real test would come outside the gym, in the unpredictable world of hallways and locker rooms. That test arrived sooner than either of them expected. One Friday evening, as Terrence was closing up the gym, Malik burst through the doors, his face flushed and his breathing ragged. Terrence immediately stepped forward, alarmed. "Malik, what happened?" The boy slumped against the wall, his hands shaking. "They jumped me," he said, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "After school. I was walking home, and they just cornered me." Terrence's stomach dropped. "Are you hurt?" Malik shook his head. "Not really. I mean, I got a few hits, but He looked up, a glimmer of something almost like pride in his eyes. I didn't let them scare me. I remembered what you said. Stay calm. Look for an out. They tried to grab my bag, but I broke free and ran. Terrence exhaled, relief washing over him. You did the right thing, Malik. You kept yourself safe. That's what matters. But they're not gonna stop, Malik said, his voice breaking. What if next time I can't get away? Terrence placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. Then we'll make sure you're ready for next time. The following week, Terrence arranged a private session with Malik. He wanted the boy to feel prepared, not just physically but mentally. They'd worked on de-escalation tactics, practicing how to use body language and tone to diffuse a situation. They also drilled specific techniques: how to block, how to escape a hold, how to protect vital areas if things got physical. But more than the techniques, Terrence focused on building Malik's confidence. You're stronger than you think, he told the boy. It's not just about what you can do with your body. It's about what you believe you're capable of. Once you know that, they'll know it too. Malik nodded, a determined look in his eyes. I'm ready. The next time Malik walked into the gym, something was different. He moved with a quiet self-assurance that hadn't been there before. After class, he pulled Terrence aside, his expression serious but calm. I stood up to them, he said simply. Terrence raised an eyebrow. How'd it go? They tried to mess with me again, Malik explained. But this time, I didn't back down. I told them I wasn't scared, and I meant it. When they tried to push me, I blocked them, just like you showed me. I didn't fight, but I didn't run either. And they backed off, Malik said, a small smile breaking through. I think they finally got the message. Terrence felt a swell of pride, but he kept his tone even. You did good, Malik. That's what strength looks like, standing your ground without losing control. Malik hesitated, then added, Thanks, coach, for everything. Terrence nodded, his voice steady but warm. You did the work, Malik. I just showed you the path. That evening, as Terrence locked up the gym, he couldn't help but reflect on how far Malik had come. The boy who had once been so guarded, so unsure of himself, was now standing taller, more confident, more resilient. Terrence knew there would still be challenges ahead. For Malik, for the other kids, and for himself. But moments like this made it all worthwhile. As he walked out into the cool night air, Terrence felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was more than a self-defense class. It was a chance to change lives, one step at a time. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The ripple effect. Months passed, and what started as a small self-defense class evolved into something much larger. The program at the community center wasn't just about learning to block punches or execute escapes anymore. It had become a support system. Parents who once fretted over their kids' safety now saw them walk taller and speak more confidently. Teachers at the local schools started noticing the difference, too. Better focus, fewer confrontations, and an overall sense of pride in the kids who participated. Terrence found himself fielding calls from local organizations, curious about how this class had sparked such a transformation. Even Greg Carter, the center's director, couldn't hide his enthusiasm. You've built something amazing here, Greg told him one afternoon as they watched a group of kids practicing on the mats. It's not just about fighting. It's about building character, and that's something these kids needed more than they realized. Terrence nodded, his gaze fixed on Malik, who was helping a younger boy refine his stance. The wiry teen who once lurked at the back of the class had grown into a leader, guiding others with patience and the same quiet strength Terrence had tried to instill in him. Malik's come a long way, Terrence said, a hint of pride in his voice. Greg smiled. You gave him the tools. He did the rest. One evening, after class had wrapped up and the kids were filtering out, Malik approached Terrence with a shy grin. Hey, coach, he said, scratching the back of his head. There's something I wanted to tell you. Terrence raised an eyebrow. "What's on your mind?" "Well, you know that guy who was bullying me. I guess he told some other kids what happened, that I stood up to him. Now he doesn't mess with me anymore." "That's good to hear," Terrence said, his voice calm. "You showed him you weren't afraid, and he backed down. That's how it should work." Malik hesitated. "It's more than that. Some of the other kids at school, the ones he used to pick on, they're coming to me now, asking for advice. They want to know how I handled it." Terrence couldn't help but smile. "And what do you tell them?" "I tell them the same stuff you told me. To stay calm, to stand their ground, to believe they're worth it." "That's a good answer," Terrence said, clapping Malik on the shoulder. "Sounds like you're teaching the class now." Malik laughed softly, but his eyes were serious. "It's weird, you know. I used to feel so powerless. Now I feel like I can actually help other people." "That's what real strength is," Terrence said. "It's not about showing off or hurting others. It's about lifting people up." The community center was abuzz with activity one Saturday afternoon as parents and community members gathered for a special event. Gray had arranged a demonstration to showcase what the kids had learned and to raise funds for more equipment. Terrence wasn't a fan of public events, but he understood their importance. The program had outgrown its initial resources, and the community's support was essential. When it came time for the demonstration, Terrence stepped onto the mat and introduced himself. "Thank you all for being here today," he began. "When we started this program, it was just a small group of kids learning the basics of self-defense. But over time, it's become something much bigger. It's become a place where kids can find confidence, discipline, and community." He glanced at Malik, who stood at the edge of the mat, waiting for his turn. "Today, we're going to show you not just the techniques we've learned, but the values we've built together." The demonstration began with simple drills: how to fall safely, break a grip, and escape a hold. The kids moved through the techniques with practiced precision, their faces serious and focused. The audience watched in silence, their expressions a mix of awe and admiration. Then it was Malik's turn. He stepped forward, demonstrating how to defuse a confrontation without throwing a punch. He showed how to maintain eye contact, how to use a calm voice, and how to walk away if possible. The audience erupted into applause as Malik finished, his posture straight and his confidence radiating. Terrence felt a surge of pride. This wasn't just a class anymore. It was a movement. The kids weren't just learning how to protect themselves. They were learning how to carry themselves, how to face challenges with resilience, and how to help others do the same. As the event wound down, Terrence stood by the gym door, shaking hands and thanking people for their support. A woman approached him, her son in tow. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Coach T," she said, her voice trembling, "I just want to thank you. My son used to come home from school miserable. He hated going. But since he started your class, he's different. He's confident. He's happy. You've given him something I couldn't, and I'll never forget that." Terrence felt a lump rise in his throat. He had always believed in the power of what he was doing, but hearing it from a parent made it all the more real. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I'm just glad I could help." As the gym emptied out, Terrence sat alone on the bench where it had all begun. He thought about the journey, how a single moment in the park had set off a chain of events that changed not only his life, but the lives of so many others. He thought about the kids who had found their voices, the parents who had found peace of mind, and the community that had found strength in unity. The night air crept in through the open doors, cool and crisp. Terrence leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. He had always known that strength wasn't just about fighting. It was about making choices, taking responsibility, and finding the courage to stand up not just for yourself, but for others. He opened his eyes and looked at the empty gym. It wasn't so empty anymore. It was filled with memories, lessons, and the echoes of a brighter future. As Terrence sat there, letting the weight of the moment settle, he heard the faint sound of footsteps approaching. He turned to see Malik standing a few feet away, His usual guarded expression softened into something that looked almost like gratitude. "Hey, Coach," Malik said, his voice quiet. "Hey, Malik. Thought you'd gone home already." Malik shrugged. "I wanted to say thanks. For everything. I didn't really get it at first, why you kept pushing us to learn all that stuff. But now," he hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Now I see it's not just about fighting. It's about feeling like you can handle whatever comes your way." Terrence nodded, a warm pride swelling in his chest. "That's exactly it. It's about believing in yourself. You've done the work, Malik. You've earned that confidence." Malik shuffled his feet, looking down for a moment before meeting Terrence's eyes again. "I've been thinking, maybe I could help out with the class. You know, with the new kids who are just starting out. Show them what you showed me." Terrence's smile widened. "I think that's a great idea. You'd make a good mentor." The boy's face lit up, and for the first time, Terrence saw not just a student, but a leader in the making. The next few weeks were some of the most rewarding Terrence had ever experienced. With Malik's help, the class expanded. New kids joined, many of them nervous and unsure at first, but quickly finding their footing under the guidance of someone who had been in their shoes. Malik's story inspired them in a way that even Terrence's couldn't. He was proof that change was possible. That strength came from perseverance and belief in oneself. Parents stopped by to watch, sometimes staying to chat with Terrence after class. They spoke of the changes they saw in their kids, not just in how they handled conflict, but in how they approached life. Grades improved. Friendships deepened. The community grew stronger. What had started as a simple idea, a self-defense program to keep kids safe, had become a movement that empowered an entire neighborhood. One evening, as Terrence was packing up, Greg Carter stepped into the gym, a smile spreading across his face. "You've done something incredible here, Terrence. I hope you know that." Terrence looked around the gym, now filled with life, laughter, and purpose. "I couldn't have done it without everyone's support, and without kids like Malik stepping up." Greg placed a hand on Terrence's shoulder. "You've made a real difference, not just for these kids, but for all of us. I think it's safe to say you've given this community a new kind of strength." As Greg left, Terrence stood alone for a moment, soaking in the quiet. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every step. He thought back to that evening in the park, to the moment he decided to stand up not just for himself, but for something bigger. That choice had rippled out in ways he never could have imagined. Terrence walked to the door, flipping off the lights and stepping out into the cool night air. Above him, the stars were bright, each one a reminder that even in the vast darkness, light could always find a way through. As he locked up and turned toward home, Terrence felt at peace. The fight that had once defined him was no longer just about defending himself. It was about lifting others up, showing them their own strength, and helping them believe that, no matter what, they could rise above.